Welcome to the Physical Culture Blueprint. This is a project we've been working on for many months, and I'm happy to finally share it with you. This is your definitive guide on how to crush it in life without sacrificing your health. This masterclass is a result of decades of experience using these same lessons on both ourselves and our clients. So a common problem we see is that too many professionals often let their health and well-being take a backseat to life. But you shouldn't, because when you're firing on all cylinders, you feel and perform your best. To us, training isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's the foundation for building a strong, healthy body and mind. And that's where this course comes in. We're not just here to talk about building muscle or losing weight, though that is part of it, but we want to help you create a mindset, lifestyle, and plan that supports your goals and enhances your quality of life. During this course, we'll cover some big topics, lay out timeless principles, and craft a sustainable and practical personal plan. This exercise is all about finding what works for you. So with that, let's dive into our agenda. All right, so before we get into everything, I want to take a moment to go over our agenda. This course is going to be broken up into 7 chapters with 3 modules each. We're going to start off with some context first, so we're going to both be on the same page. I want to go over why we're doing this, a quick story about myself, and what this course is all about. After that, we're going to dive into the meat and potatoes of the masterclass by going over 5 pillars of high performance. We're going to set the stage by talking about mindset, covering lifestyle, nutrition, and health markers, and then wrap up with a discussion on training. And finally, at the end, we're going to arm you with some practical strategies for executing these lessons. We're going to present a framework for goal setting, walk you through your own personal blueprint, and then talk about long-term strategies to stay on the right course. We have a lot to get through, so I'm going to try my best to keep each section tight. And with that, let's get into it. So I want to start with context because I want to set the stage properly. If you care more about the what I need to do, you could probably skip this part, but psychologically, people are more likely to follow through with difficult things when they know why they're doing it. So for this chapter, I'm going to cut deep and explain my motivations for this course, but I also want to explain who I am, what I do, and how I got here. And then finally wrap up with a brief explanation on what this course exactly is, who it's for, and most importantly, what this course is not. I'm excited to share this with you, so let's dive in. So there's currently a war against our health and longevity. Chronic sickness has been normalized in the US, and very few people are doing anything about it. When I think about why so many people are sick, I can't help but think about all the external forces that actively work against us. For one thing, the healthcare system's incentives are completely misaligned with its patients. Doctors focus on how they can treat sickness as opposed to how they can prevent it, and this is where I believe the health and fitness industry really can step in. While medicine treats, fitness prevents. I believe that as healthcare professionals, fitness coaches must continue focusing on preventative health. And with that, I think it's my obligation as a gym owner to use our platform as Physical Culture to teach timeless principles that you would never hear from your primary doctor. Now, I'm not saying doctors are useless, but I do think doctors need to be better when it comes to teaching preventative habits instead of quickly running to write a prescription. Prescription drugs are a band-aid solution that never address the root cause of illness. And the side effects of these drugs often keep patients perpetually sick and on a lifelong journey of medication. By the time most people pass middle age, quality of life begins to fall off a cliff, and we just accept this as something that happens. So bringing this back to you, a high performer. One common thread I see amongst high performers is this idea about sacrificing yourself to get ahead. And if you know me personally, I too have a history of working myself into the ground. But what I realized is that to actually get ahead, you just need to outlast everyone else. Too many of my friends, peers, and clients sacrifice their health for their careers. Now, while I agree, if you take a more difficult path today, you're going to have an easier life in the future, but I will insert a caveat that that's only true if you don't end up sacrificing your health in the interim. The one thing you can't risk sacrificing is your health. And this idea is supported by one of my favorite quotes by Confucius, where he says, "A healthy man wants 1,000 things, but a sick man only wants one." I promise you won't care how much money is in your bank account or what your title is at work if you feel like a shell of your former self. And if you still don't believe me, just find anyone who's over 50 whose health is deteriorating and ask them if it was worth it. And just to add some color to the last slide, most people are sick. 60% of Americans have a chronic disease. This could be diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, dementia, cancer, arthritis, and way more. And I'm not going to stand here and say that all of it's preventable. Obviously, some things are just out of our control, but many of these conditions can be delayed or weakened if people just had better habits. In addition, 69% of Americans are overweight as defined by a BMI over 25, and 31% of Americans are obese with a BMI over 30. Now, I understand BMI doesn't take into consideration muscle and fat composition, and even I'm technically overweight with a BMI of 27, but that doesn't change the fact that our society has a weight problem. This isn't only isolated to adults. Youth obesity has been steadily increasing for decades and will snowball once these children become adults. And finally, somehow, despite being technologically advanced and spending so much on healthcare, the US life expectancy is now 76 years old, the lowest in 2 decades. Now again, I will acknowledge this number may be affected by COVID, but regardless, this is unacceptable from a societal level. We need to do better. All that said, however, this doesn't have to be you. And just by the mere fact that you're watching this, I'm going to assume this won't be you, because clearly you respect the importance of taking care of yourself. All right, so time for a quick story. So before I opened Physical Culture, I used to work on Wall Street. I was guaranteed to work 6 days a week. Saturday was my only day off, but even then sometimes I still went into the office. And an easy work day for me was 12 hours. I promised myself that I would work out at least 4 days a week. Now, of course, there were some weeks when it was impossible, but I still tried my best to make it those days because it was truthfully one of the only things I could control in my life. It was important that I intentionally carved out time for myself, because if not, I felt that I would start to lose my identity. And what I observed was that pretty much everyone was working themselves into the ground. Everyone was sleep deprived, on caffeine or drugs, had failing relationships, and saw their health melting away. People were becoming shells of themselves in real time. And within a few months, I realized that these people weren't people that I aspired to be like, and I started thinking about my exit strategy. Although the money was good, it wasn't worth the sacrifice. And when I finally left, I was replaced, and of course, everything continued as normal. It's important to remind yourself that in many of these high-power corporate roles, you're just expendable. And the more you let your career sink its teeth into you, the more parts of yourself you may eventually lose. And I share this with you because I think it's everyone's personal responsibility to resist. Life either happens to you or you happen to life. Take back your time, set boundaries, and create a standard that you live by. Whether you acknowledge it or not, every decision in life is a trade-off. You want to go to happy hour? Okay, you might make a business connection or meet someone. Or it could be a complete waste of time, and now you drank alcohol, had too many hors d'oeuvres, and now you missed your workout. You never really know, but this is where good judgment comes in. Don't just be on autopilot, think for yourself. Another thing I realized is that the actual benefit of going to the gym wasn't the workout I was doing, it was literally the act of going to the gym. Every week, especially on the days that I didn't want to go to the gym, I would suck it up and force myself to go. Whether I had a good day or a bad day, there was no excuse. The mental discipline I built during that period was something that still lives with me today. Who cares what the workout was? Showing up and doing things that are good for you, even though you don't want to do it, is a principle I still live by to this day. I genuinely think it's a trait that makes you a better leader, friend, and role model for others. And the last thing I'll say on this topic is the old cliche that health is wealth. I don't care how much money you have, having a fit body is a clear signal that you're disciplined, hardworking, and consistent. People treat you differently, and you start to see yourself differently as well. In your 20s, you can get away without working out, but once you hit your 30s, you start to see the pack diverge. And by your 40s, you can easily tell who took care of themselves and who is on a fast track to long-term problems. It's not rocket science, just look at the people around you. This course is for high performers, however you define that. To me, a high performer is someone who's in alignment with their mind, body, and spirit. It's somebody who knows where they're going, has a plan, and won't let anything stop them. I know high performers who are parents, teachers, business owners, athletes, you name it. The point is that you hold yourself to a specific standard. So this course is a guide to help you feel your best so you can continue to crush it in whatever you do. This is not a fat loss challenge where you must do X, Y, Z or it won't work. But instead, it's a framework on how to live a healthier, more robust life. Really, I just want this to be a practical plan to help you level up. There are a million ways to be healthy. By the end of this course, you'll be armed with actionable habits you can begin incorporating into your life. And my suggestion would be to take what works and discard what doesn't. It's unrealistic to incorporate every habit we cover in this masterclass, but you can always revisit it once you get your feet under yourself. In addition, I just want to clarify that this course is meant to be direction. In fact, a lot of this information you can get online for free. There are tons of great resources on the internet, and I would consider this to just be our greatest hits of what works for us and our clients. That said, accountability is sold separately. There's no magic bullet habit I'm going to share that's going to change your life. The secret sauce is in doing the hard work. And if you find it difficult to do the work on your own, then maybe consider hiring a coach. All that said, if you have the internal discipline to execute some of these habits consistently on your own, then there really shouldn't be a reason you can't lose fat, build muscle, and generally feel better on a day-to-day basis. It won't happen overnight, but over time, great habits snowball and eventually become second nature. So in our first section, I want to talk about the most important topic, which is your mindset. The reason I'm starting here is because I don't think most people appreciate how interconnected the mind, body, and spirit are. We're going to spend some time talking about how our beliefs shape our reality. I also want to cover how external forces impact our health and what to do about it. And I want to talk about how discipline is the one superpower that all high performers have in common. So with that, let's get into it. So the first framework I want to present to you is the 3 components of health. Physical health is probably the most well understood, but to define it, it's really about our ability to move functionally without pain while also having muscular and cardiovascular strength. To sum this up in one question, are you physically capable? Next, we have cognitive health, or our ability to process information, learn, and remember. In today's day and age, most people are bombarded with way too much information. It's important to remember that having a healthy information diet can radically affect your mindset. The things we read, watch, and listen to have a profound impact on our mindset. So be careful what you feed your mind. And finally, we have emotional health. Do you have a sense of belonging? Are you fulfilled with your life or what you do for work? For many people, these are existential questions, and it's very easy to avoid these questions altogether because they can seem daunting. I'm not a therapist, but if you find yourself avoiding these questions about purpose and happiness, you probably should confront it. If we don't feel good about ourselves, it's very easy to spiral in a downward cycle. With that framework as a backdrop for this conversation, I want you to do a quick audit of yourself. How would you rate your physical, cognitive, and emotional health right now using a green light for all systems go, a yellow light for caution, and a red light for definitely needs work? Write that down and keep it in your head throughout this class. In my experience, physical health is the one thing that I have most control over, and it's the one thing that I can usually override the others. If I ever have a bad day, hitting a hard workout usually does the trick, even if it's just a short-term fix. One of the greatest life lessons I learned at a young age is that your beliefs become your actions that shape your reality. Over the years, I've seen how people both self-sabotage and self-motivate themselves to heights that seem impossible. This is why I think the things we read, watch, and listen to are so important. If you're told all the time that you won't amount to anything, eventually you'll believe it. And guess what? You probably won't amount to much. But if you're told you can do anything you want and actually believe it, I bet that you have a higher likelihood of succeeding in whatever you do. I see a lot of people who complain about the world not realizing that they're actually the problem. The world isn't out to get you. The world is just the world, and frankly doesn't care about you or my individual life. Once you realize that you are your own worst enemy, you'll be able to take back control and do something about it. But if you bend the knee to life and just say, well, this is just how things are going to be, I can guarantee you'll never accomplish what you set out to do. My point here is that your mind and body are interconnected. If you have a healthy body and sick mind, you're still sick, and conversely, if you have a sick body and healthy mind, you're still sick. Respect the fact that your health is much more complex than just looking good naked. Use positive self-talk with yourself, surround yourself with inspiring people, and remove energy vampires from your life. You have the power to create the world around you. So I want to introduce another idea that hopefully you've seen in the past. This is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a psychological theory that describes the nature of human needs and motivation. At the bottom, we have physiological needs that every person needs to survive. Think food, water, shelter, sleep. Without the basics, you can't live. But as we climb up the pyramid, we move from physical needs like safety, security, love, and belonging to more transcendent concepts like self-esteem and self-actualization. Notice that health is part of safety and security, meaning it's the foundation for a fulfilled life. Without your health, it's much more difficult to have relationships, intimacy, and connection. Now, obviously, health is not an on or off switch. It's not like you have it or don't have it. Your health is more akin to a frog that's slowly boiling in the water. You don't feel it because it's happening gradually, and you just chalk it up to, I'm just getting older, or I'll just take this medication to keep it under control, until eventually you realize that you're in too deep. To me, fitness is a sign of self-respect. It may seem selfish to others, but choosing to go against societal norms to eat well, train often, and sleep early is a sign of self-care. If you respect and care yourself, finding love and belonging, self-esteem, and eventually self-actualization becomes much easier. I don't want to speak for everyone, but to me, a high performer is someone trying to achieve self-actualization. I want to live in alignment with my purpose and achieve my inner potential, and it seems impossible to do that without my health. So in the last module, I basically spoke about how everything is your fault. And while I think it's helpful to be extremely self-accountable, I also think it would be tone deaf if I didn't address the elephant in the room, which is that there are strong systemic external forces actively working to keep society and individuals sick. From a purely social perspective, sickness is completely normalized. It's normal to be on lifelong medication. It's normal to be overweight. It's normal to eat processed food. It's normal to not get sleep. It's normal to have a substance problem. Beyond that, however, the food we eat is mostly fake. Most food is ultra-processed, bathed in pesticides, and genetically modified. We sit there and wonder why society is so sick without realizing how much poison we put into our bodies daily. When it comes to doctors, the conversation is always around what prescription they can write as opposed to what can we do to naturally prevent or fight this problem. It's always a band-aid solution. Meanwhile, the pharmaceutical and food industries constantly lobby our politicians to enact policies that keep us sick and dependent on their products. These institutions do not have our best interests at heart. They want to keep us sedated and misdirected. And just to pour salt on a wound, let's consider this. As a former banker and hedge fund trader, I can assure you that money is not real. It may seem off topic, but it's crucial to understand that a government that prints trillions of dollars to produce an experimental vaccine, which is now exhibiting adverse health effects, all to combat an illness that originated in a lab that disproportionately affects people with chronic diseases, is not acting in your best interest. Period. Stop trusting these institutions and start using common sense. I agree, the fix is definitely in. There are so many forces working against us to keep us sick, but we can do something about it if we're armed with the right information. And just to add more flavor to this conversation, 66% of Americans are on a prescription drug. This number likely skews higher towards older populations with chronic disease, but it's still a clear indication of failing physical health. In addition, 34% of Americans have symptoms of anxiety or depression. Anecdotally, I think this number is probably much higher and a symptom of a breakdown in emotional health. This number also skews to much younger populations where the stigma of mental health is less. That said, I think it's important to respect that the stories we tell ourselves often become self-fulfilling. Now, I'm not invalidating anyone's condition, but if you constantly tell yourself you have anxiety and are told you have anxiety, I guarantee you will be more anxious. The thoughts we plant in our head and how we self-identify manifest themselves in reality given enough time. And finally, the scary stat of them all, 73% of US food supply is ultra-processed. These are chemically engineered foods that are low cost and convenient, but come with a massive risk. There's plenty of research that shows that these foods are linked to higher incidences of cancer, heart attacks, and even death. But unfortunately, this has become part of our food culture and society. I know this all may seem like doom and gloom and even partially off topic, but I share all this information to drive an important point home, which is that health is a serious cultural problem in the United States. It's not just individuals lacking personal accountability and being uninformed, but also massive systemic forces working against us. The average American is sick, weak, and poor. Good thing you're not average. And while it seems like a massive uphill battle, there are things we can do at an individual level to improve our circumstances. And I'm not saying I can fix society's problems. Many of these issues are so deeply entrenched that it would be a waste of my breath, but I am trying my best to make physical culture a lighthouse for those who need it on those especially dark days. My message to you is remember that you can always change your individual situation. At the end of the day, health is a personal responsibility. It will take a little extra work and sacrifice to be a high performer. Absolutely, but I encourage you to be different. You know where you're going, you have a plan, and nothing can stop you. All right, so I believe discipline is by far the biggest superpower any high performer can cultivate. On a long enough time scale, discipline is what separates the winners from the losers. And the best part about it is that discipline is something anyone could work on. You don't need to be born with certain genetics, money, or status to have discipline. It's something everyone could train. And discipline specifically is so important when it comes to achieving your goals because motivation can be very fleeting. Motivation comes and goes. If you only went to the gym on the days you felt like it, then you would never go. And what's more interesting is that when you go to the gym on the days that you don't want to go, that actually builds your discipline and eventually becomes a self-fulfilling cycle. This is because habits compound over time. One of the best quotes comes from Albert Einstein, who said, "Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it." If you succumb to your feelings when you don't want to go to the gym and stay home, that negative behavior will continue to multiply in your future. Instead, I challenge you to persist because the truth is, the only time you lose is when you give up. If you have a goal and keep submitting to their emotions about it, you'll never get to where you want to go. The key is to push through adversity until your mind is so strong that it becomes second nature to you. One of the most common challenges I see with professionals and entrepreneurs we work with is that people just don't have time. Now, people say they don't have time for the gym, but also somehow miraculously find time to watch every episode of a new show on Netflix. When someone says they don't have time, what they really mean is, this just isn't a priority for me right now. And that's fine. Your life doesn't need to revolve around training. But saying you don't have time is also incorrect. The reality is that people make time for what they care about. And I understand it's very easy to get pulled in different directions. So in order to fight that, you need to set yourself up for success and start following a calendar. If you're a professional or work for yourself, I'm going to assume you keep a calendar. And if you don't, I'd highly recommend you immediately start. With that said, one of the best skills I learned from working in banking is to start time blocking your calendar. This is a really simple habit that forces you to allocate time on your calendar so you can properly dedicate time and energy to specific tasks that need to get done. For me, I like to put 5 specific categories on my calendar. When I sleep, eat, work out, have meetings, and need to do deep work. Everything else is basically free time for me to enjoy. This ensures that I get what I need to get done before I move on to leisure activities. You don't need to be a workaholic to get work done, you just need to work smarter. So what are some practical ways to improve your discipline? While this isn't an exhaustive list, the first idea to chew on is setting yourself up for success. For me, I think it's very important to have a rhythm, consistency, and structure during my week. I like working out on the same days. I generally know which days are busier or slower, and I always try to do the most difficult thing first to get it out of the way. But beyond that, you need to know how to set boundaries so that you don't bite off more than you can chew. A lot of people get derailed when the responsibilities of life begin to stack up and they start getting pulled in different directions. Obviously, some of this is unavoidable. For example, let's say you have kids. That's understandable. But there are other things you can say no to. Learn to say no and protect your energy. There are only so many things you could do on any given day. Over time, people will respect your boundaries and give you the space to focus on yourself without feeling guilty. And finally, I know I've harped on this already, but your discipline can be trained. Go through your schedule and figure out what are absolute non-negotiables for you. For me, I never miss training. I don't care what's going on in my life. It's a non-negotiable for my mental and physical health. Even if I have the worst day in the world, I'll still make sure to work out because I know in the short term, I'm gonna feel better, but more importantly, I know my willpower will get stronger. Of course, I'm using working out as a simple example we can all relate to, but your non-negotiable can mean anything. It could be in bed by a certain time, having dinner with your family, or no carbs after 5 p.m. Whatever it is, stick to it, and you'll be surprised how resilient and consistent you become. The second pillar I want to cover is lifestyle. Now, of course, this is a very broad topic, but it's worth discussing so early on because the time we spend outside the gym is at least 95% of your week. You could be doing everything right in the kitchen and in training, but if your lifestyle is not in alignment with those actions, you're never going to feel your best. So in this chapter, we're going to go over 3 modules. First is the environment we live in. We're going to talk about home, work, and social life, and then we're going to dive into stress and why it's both good and bad for us. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with a discussion on sleep, which is criminally underrated. overrated. So with that, let's dive in. So I want to start this discussion on lifestyle by talking about home life, because frankly, if there's one place in the world you can control, it's hopefully your home. So the biggest challenge we see in households is typically around food and stress. Without getting too deep into the nutrition rabbit hole, you need to understand that food serves two purposes. One is biological and the other is cultural. Our relationship with food therefore ends up on a spectrum. Sometimes we eat because we just need nutrition, and other times we eat just because food tastes great. Your job is to figure out where you sit on that spectrum and what works best for you. If 90% of the time you eat is for pleasure and 10% of the time you eat it's for function, then that's probably not ideal. Now, I'm not here to tell you that you can't enjoy food, but just understand that there are trade-offs. On that note, my biggest piece of advice here is to avoid having junk food in your house. And what I mean by that is overly processed foods that are packed with sugar and fat. If it's in your house, I guarantee you'll eventually eat it. And the reality is, when you're not in your house, you probably already get tempted with enough poor eating opportunities. So do yourself a favor and try to protect yourself from yourself. And finally, your home should be a place of rest and of rejuvenation. I recognize this is easier said than done, but try your best to create a peaceful environment so that your body can recover from the pressures of life and responsibility. We'll talk about this in the next chapter, but chronic stress can lead to many health issues over time, so let's make sure that home is a peaceful place. When it comes to the workday, I think it's very important to be intentional about what your eating plan is for the day. One of the most common issues we see with professionals is that they skip breakfast because they often don't have enough time in the morning. What's worse is that they call it intermittent fasting, thinking it's going to help them lose weight, when in practice, it actually leads to overeating later in the day. Whether you work from home or go into the office, I think the workday is the perfect time to eat for fuel. Number one, you probably want to feel sharp and energized during your workday, but more importantly, if you save the pleasure food for date night or socializing, it feels more like a treat and you still get to enjoy it. The point is, you got to pick your spots when it comes to eating. Don't waste the calories if you're going to sit in front of a computer all day. On that note, one of the best things you could do for yourself is to find a few restaurants near you that have healthy takeout options. Now, I'll get into what that means in the nutrition chapter, but really we're just looking for takeout options that use natural ingredients, have equal portions, protein, and carbs. Once you have a rotation of healthy takeout options, you pretty much future-proof yourself from binging on junk food. Now, if you're in the office, going out for lunch can sometimes be difficult. Either pack up a meal in advance, or once again, get comfortable with setting boundaries and saying no. Don't succumb to peer pressure and get a burger and fries just because that's what your coworkers eat. And similarly, if you're working from home, it's very easy to mindlessly wander over to the kitchen and start picking at food, especially if you didn't eat a full breakfast. Snacking out of boredom is the easiest way to overeat. If you're going to eat a full meal. Save the snacks for a nice treat every once in a while. Finally, let's talk about how to navigate having a social life. There are plenty of people who manage to have a social life and maintain a healthy body, but I think it always comes down to picking your spots. Unless you're going out every evening, it's very difficult to ruin your diet and training from having a social life if you're doing everything right during the work week. If your diet, sleep, and training are on point 80% of the time, you're probably going to be fine. That said, I always try my best to game plan social events. This means getting training in before, so I know I have a rest day the following day if I'm going to be drinking. It also means prioritizing healthy eating leading up to an event, depending on what it is. For example, if I know I'm going out to dinner, I'll make sure to eat a bit lighter on the carbs that day and focus mostly on protein. If you're going to a work happy hour or a social event, maybe you prioritize protein hors d'oeuvres instead of the carbs. And personally, I generally try to avoid mixed drinks. I usually drink liquor with ice or have wine. And I try to avoid high-calorie mixed drinks like beer because I know just how terrible and bloated I will feel later. I guess my broader point here is to once again set a standard for yourself. Know where your limits begin and where they end. Maybe it's setting yourself a specific drink limit in the evening, or even having your home stocked with electrolyte water so when you stumble back home, you can start fighting off the inevitable hangover. All these little habits add up very quickly and really lessen the negative effects of having a life. Remember, it's all about finding balance. With that, let's talk about stress. Stress is probably one of the most important and misunderstood health issues modern humans deal with. While the topic of stress can seem like fluff to some, it is grounded in plenty of science and is critical to your emotional health. It's important to understand that our bodies evolved to navigate stress. Increased stress causes changes in hormones in our body. The two most important are adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline is the first responder during times of stress and helps increase blood flow to muscles and raises blood sugar levels. This, of course, is helpful during times of fight or flight. Cortisol, on the other hand, is released soon after adrenaline, which increases your brain's utilization of sugars and shuts down all non-essential bodily functions. Stress and cortisol are incredibly important in life or death situations, but unfortunately, stress also arises every day from modern living, and everyone has a different response and tolerance to stress. And I would say that high performers likely have higher stress tolerance than most people. Like your muscles grow after being broken down in the gym, so does your willpower. The key point I want to make here is that we don't necessarily hate stress, we just don't want the wrong amount of stress. Peak performance occurs in the Goldilocks zone of stress. When we have too much stress, stress, we can get overwhelmed, but conversely, if we're not stressed enough, we can become bored and disconnected. Like most things, don't try to run away from stress, try to embrace it, but also know your limits. Otherwise, you risk anxiety, fatigue, or burnout. In my own life, I try to use a Stoic philosophy to reframe my stress. If your base assumption is that life is difficult and suffering is part of the human experience, you quickly accept reality and begin cultivating a mindset of resilience and emotional strength. I don't know one person who has an easy life. Whether you're born rich or poor, privileged or not, everyone deals with hardship. What I've found is that stress isn't particularly bad, and most of the best things I've gotten out of life have been because I pressed on during stressful times. That said, I think it's important that we don't get addicted to stress either. Being in fight or flight mode may be helpful to perform your best, but if your sympathetic nervous system is always on, it can lead to adrenal fatigue. What we want to avoid, however, is chronic stress, which can lead to increased cortisol in the body, which will eventually negatively impact your health and performance. A lot of high performers build up such a tolerance to stress that they become cortisol junkies and think they're being lazy or not working hard if their body isn't stressed. This will eventually lead to a decline in emotional health, which has a trickle-down effect on your mindset and physical health. Just remember, stress is an internal feeling. While external forces may trigger stress inside of us, stress is personal, and how you respond to stress is more important than the stress itself. You have to pick your battles when it comes to stress. When you're young, everything feels like it's the end of the world. But as you get older, you realize certain things aren't worth stressing. When you find yourself stressing out, catch yourself. Over time, you'll master yourself and become more resilient and peaceful. Aside from adopting a Stoic mindset, I want to go over some practical ways we can navigate the inevitable stress we'll encounter in life. While many high performers love to live in fight or flight mode, we also need to connect with our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest mode. This is when your body conserves energy and is relaxed. Although our nervous system activates automatically, you should always be aware of balancing both modes. Always make sure to carve out time for yourself. Yes, you may love working and may feel like you're wasting your life if you're resting, but it's essential to do your activities that replenish your soul and also use a different part of your brain. If you're constantly working in logic and math, find time for creativity. And on that note, do things that are fun. Reconnect with a childhood hobby or do something unique that you love just because. Another mindset shift to navigate stress is to stop worrying about the destination. If you're a high performer, you probably have big dreams. I do too, but sitting there unsatisfied that you're not there yet is a waste of time. It's not like once you achieve your goals, you'll magically be happy. Just look back in your life and think about all the things you've accomplished that were once dreams to your younger self that you now take for granted. Focus on the journey, not the destination. And on that note, meditating or journaling could be a great way to ground yourself and reset emotionally. Creating moments of stillness in your day can remove yourself from the overstimulation of the internet. Often, our guilty pleasures come from coping mechanisms we develop in response to chronic stress. If you find yourself spiraling into negative behavior, try to catch yourself and redirect yourself into better behaviors. This all comes down to mastering yourself, which is a lifelong journey and the secret to life. So now that we've discussed lifestyle and stress, I want to cover one of the most underrated habits, sleep. The whole "I'll sleep when I die" mentality is not only stupid, but it's wrong. Sleep is so important that after only 24 hours of sleep deprivation, you become cognitively and physiologically impaired. Meanwhile, most people can survive without food for 1 to 2 months or without water for 3 to 7 days. So basically, sleep is more important than food and water. Just think about that. For humans, sleep is a necessary biological process that occurs for roughly 1/3 of our lives. Specifically, our sleep schedule follows a 24-hour clock known as our circadian rhythm. In general, this means that we've evolved to sleep with the moon and wake with the sun. That said, modern technology has artificially extended our days unnecessarily, which has led to many sleeping disorders and, go figure, unintended health consequences. Sleep is essentially our body's life support system and is the closest thing we have to a natural performance-enhancing drug. When we think about sleep, there are really 4 pillars we like to focus on: regularity, continuity, quantity, and quality. Good sleep hygiene includes going to bed at the same time every day, having restful, uninterrupted sleep, spending at least 7 hours in bed, and eliminating sleep interference through stress, caffeine, or alcohol. Our poor relationship with sleep is a key reason for many modern health issues. Interestingly, humans are the only species that will purposely deprive themselves of sleep outside of starvation conditions. Sleep deprivation also causes the quickest reduction of health, and chronic undersleeping, which many high performers suffer from, will lead to a negative feedback on your health. When we consistently undersleep, our body produces excess cortisol, which leads to anxiety, reduced fat metabolism, muscle breakdown, and water retention. In addition, it triggers an increase in ghrelin, a hormone that increases your appetite for high-calorie, high-fat foods. And finally, when you sleep less, your energy levels are less throughout the day, and you naturally exercise less. All of these effects result in increased weight gain, which eventually leads to more personal stress and causes you to overwork more, which of course repeats itself until your health spirals out of control. How many people do you know who are stuck in this cycle? When you start to layer on a lack of motivation and energy from sleep deprivation, deprivation, combined with an increased appetite, increased cortisol, and the standard American diet, it's very easy to understand why so many Americans suffer from obesity. This is a systemic and cyclical issue many Americans deal with every day and think is normal. The silver lining here, of course, is that awareness is the first step to change. So identifying sleep as the root cause of this downward health spiral can be critical for so many of you watching this. So now that we know we need to fix our sleep hygiene, what are some practical things we can do? Well, first off, we want to make sure we go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, plus or minus 1 hour. It's called circadian rhythm for a reason. In general, you want to spend at least 7 hours in bed a day, but some people may need as much as 9 hours. Another great way to improve the quality of your sleep is to use a white noise machine, something that could cancel out excess noise outside your room and create a calmer sleep environment. It may seem excessive, but don't knock it until you try it. In addition, try to sleep in a cool, dark room. Keep your room slightly below room temperature and use blackout shades if you find that sunrise wakes you up too early. And on that note, invest in your bedroom. The more comfortable your sleep environment is, the more likely you'll enjoy sleep and want to spend time there. Don't skip on buying a good mattress, comfy pillows, and cool bed sheets. Now, what about leading up before going to bed? Well, before sleep, always try to limit eating a few hours before if possible. Limit water intake so you don't wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and try to limit high stress working or excessive screen time before bed. And one of my best pieces of advice is to avoid white overhead light once the sun sets. In the evening, you only want warm light at your eye level or below to simulate the sun setting. Basically, you want to make sure your body is getting ready to relax an hour or two before you actually go to bed. Many people don't sleep well because they go from go, go, go in their day to now it's time to sleep, and that's just way too drastic. You can't just flip a switch and go to bed. Your nervous system needs to switch to rest and digest mode for you to have a restful sleep. All right, so finally, the topic you've all been waiting for, nutrition. Now, I'll preface this chapter by saying, yes, nutrition is a very complex topic filled with a lot of baggage and negative associations for people. What I'm presenting here is a suggestion, not a requirement. At the end of the day, you need to figure out what works best for your body. With that said, we're gonna cover a few big topics in this chapter, so buckle up. I wanna first talk about the standard American diet and why it's so common in society. We're then gonna talk about calories and macros from a scientific point of view, and then I'm gonna present a few actionable frameworks for you to apply to your nutrition. So with that, let's get into it. So I wanna first start off with the standard American diet. The unfortunate reality is that our relationship with food is a result of food manufacturers and their optimization problem gone wrong. Back in the day, food scarcity was a serious problem. Now we face a bigger problem, food abundance. But I'm not talking about good food. I'm talking about an abundance of poison disguised as food. The standard American diet optimizes for affordability, taste, convenience, and portability. Now, while in theory, this sounds like a net benefit to society, it inevitably results in food that is cheap, high in sugar and fat, mass-produced, and shelf-stable. Think of all your favorite childhood foods like Pop-Tarts, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and Cup of Noodles. While they provide calories, they're hardly nutritious. When we look at studies on calories consumed, meat, eggs, nuts, fruits, and vegetables only make up a quarter of the average American diet. Meanwhile, 2/3 of calories come from processed foods like flours, cereals, sweeteners, and added oils. While these processed foods were created to make food more accessible to everyone, it's the reason why so many lower income individuals disproportionately suffer from chronic diseases. As a simple rule of thumb, convenient food is generally processed, while natural food is more nutritious. That said, there are plenty of very convenient, cheap foods that are natural and healthy. For example, most produce is actually cheaper than buying packaged goods. And in fact, have you ever tried to overeat meat and produce? It's really difficult. Most processed food is very calorie dense, which is why eating a cup of blueberries is only 80 calories, while one Snickers bar has triple the calories. It's also important to recognize that natural sugar in blueberries is very different from the refined sugar found in a candy bar. One of the best life skills to learn is how to read a nutrition label. While there's a lot of noise on nutrition labels and they can sometimes be a little inaccurate, knowing what you're putting into your body will save you a huge headache in the long run. Over here to the side, I have one of my favorite brands of Greek yogurts, Oikos, just to use as a simple example. The first thing to notice in the second line is the serving size and servings per container. In this case, the entire unit contains 5 servings, and each serving is 3/4 cup, which is 100 calories. So if you ate the entire container, it would be only 500 calories. The second thing I want you to notice is the percent daily values on the right side of the label. These are numbers produced by the FDA based on a 2,000 calorie diet that they recommend. This is also the same FDA that recommends 50 grams of protein a day. We'll talk about this in the next module, but let's just ignore all those numbers because they're completely useless. What I do care, however, on the nutrition label is how many grams of fat, carbs, fiber, sugar, and protein are in each serving. In general, we want to avoid anything with added sugars. We like high protein and fiber, and carbs and fat are not bad as long as it's part of a complete diet. The last thing I want to call out is the ingredient list at the bottom of the label. My general rule of thumb is the fewer ingredients, the better. The ingredient list always starts with the most common ingredient. In this case, it's cultured grade A non-fat milk, which makes sense, but beware of anything that has too many ingredients, especially if you can't pronounce some of them. Obviously, meat and produce don't come with labels because they're typically one ingredient, but you can always Google a nutrition label for any food you're unsure about. It may seem like overkill to read every nutrition label, but once you get the habit of it, it'll make your life so much easier, and you'll quickly realize how much garbage you used to put into your body. Now that you know how to read nutrition labels, I want to reiterate a point I made earlier in this class. It's important to always remember that food is both pleasure and fuel. How you break that up in your life is completely up to you. As a personal practice, I always try to compartmentalize my work and social life. When I'm working, I generally eat alone and prioritize food as fuel. And when I'm social, I give myself a lot more flexibility to eat for pleasure. If I had to guess, I probably treat food like fuel 80% of the time and eat for pleasure 20% of the time. That seems to work for me. All that is to say that you need to find the right balance for yourself. As a simple standard, I pretty much give myself the freedom to eat all the animals, plants, and fruit I want. If the food I eat can expire and go bad, it's probably naturally enough. I try to eat by a concept called raw, meaning recently, alive, and well. The closer you can eat to a food when it was alive, the better off it probably is for you. I don't know about you, but I never met anyone who got fat from overeating steak, bananas, and broccoli. Animal products, and especially red meat, get a ton of hate for being associated with chronic disease. But many studies done on red meat are also done with people who also don't work out, sit all day, and eat other refined and processed foods. We'll talk about this in another chapter, but I eat more red meat and fruit than most people I know, and my blood work is consistently very good. Try binging on real food and tell me how you feel the next day. Unless you already have an underlying condition, you'll probably be okay. It's also worth noting that eating a diverse plate of colors is also a great way to add micronutrients to your diet. While these won't directly affect your body composition, micronutrients like vitamin D, potassium, magnesium, and others help with other important bodily functions. Alright, so now for my favorite topic on nutrition, macros and calories. This may upset a few of you, but for most people, weight loss just really comes down to thermodynamics. Keeping this as simple as possible, the energy balance equation says that energy in must equal energy out. If calories in equals energy expended, then your weight's gonna stay the same. If you burn more calories than you consume, you're gonna lose weight, and if you consume more calories than you burn, you're gonna gain weight. It's really as simple as that. Now, before I go deeper into explaining this, you need to understand this actually works. If you religiously measured your calories consumed and energy burned for weeks and months on end, you would find it impossible to not lose weight. Unless, of course, you have some type of underlying condition, which is beyond the scope for this conversation. What I see in practice, however, is that people will loosely count calories for a few days and then get upset when it doesn't work and say this is BS. And to that I say, no, you just did it incorrectly. The maths. I want to start off with the right side of this energy equation. Energy burned is a function of three things: how much exercise you do, your non-exercise activity like walking around or fidgeting at your desk, and your resting metabolic rate. There's also a fourth component of this equation, which is the thermic effect of food. I won't get into it much, but some macronutrients like protein require more energy to digest and therefore also contribute to more calories burned. Regarding exercise, that's in your control. You can always work out more frequently, more intensely, or for longer. Daily activity is also in your control. Get more steps, be more active, and have a physical culture. And finally, your metabolism, which is what you can also control. The more muscle mass you have, the faster metabolism will be. On the opposite side of the equation, we have energy in, which is all the calories we consume and are made up of protein, carbs, and fat. Now, there is nothing inherently bad about protein, carbs, and fat. No protein is not bad for your kidneys and liver, no carbs are not the reason you gain weight, and no dietary fat does not store itself as body fat. All these macronutrients are essential for healthy bodily function and better body composition. That said, everything needs to be within balance. The first thing to understand is that each macronutrient has a different caloric density. 1 gram of protein is 4 calories, 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories, 1 gram of fat is 9 calories, and just for fun, 1 gram of alcohol is 7 calories. Notice foods that are high in fat are also more calorically dense than other foods. This is why we need to be careful about not overeating butter, avocados, oils, and nuts, because the calories can sneak up on you very quickly. That said, fat is not the enemy and is necessary for hormonal balance. People who eat very low fat diets or who have very low body fat may experience hormonal issues over time. That said, carbohydrates come in different shapes as well. Sugar is technically a form of carbohydrate, but not all carbs are sugars. You can get carbs from rice, potatoes, bread, fruit, candy, and juice. All carbohydrate sources will elevate your blood sugar levels at different rates. As a general rule of thumb, we want to keep our blood sugar levels stable throughout the day, so try to focus on carbohydrate sources that have a low glycemic index. That said, eating high glycemic index carbs around your workout is okay as well because your body will immediately use it for energy. So don't stress it too much and try to pick your spots. And finally, if there were one macronutrient to binge on, it would be protein. Not only is protein more satiating than carbs or fat, but it also has a strong thermic effect during digestion and is the foundation for building muscle. If you want to eat leaner proteins, focus on white fish, shrimp, and poultry. And if you want fattier proteins, go for red meat, pork, eggs, and salmon. Either way, you can't go wrong eating real animal protein. So just wrapping all this up, eat food to feel your best. Notice how different foods affect you across different time frames. For example, when you eat cake, you may immediately feel good, but maybe later in the day you have indigestion. The next morning you feel disgusted with yourself, and over time you realize that's that's the reason why you're overweight. Understand that food has trade-offs as well. Some food is amazing in the short term and awful in the long run, and vice versa. The more conscious you are of this, the better decisions you'll naturally make. Secondly, the priority should be to always build muscle. While it's obvious our society is over fat, the majority of people are also under muscled. If we control the right side of the energy equation to exercise more, be more active, and build more muscle, most people's lives would immediately improve. In addition, let's try to avoid snacking whenever possible. Or if you're going to snack, try to have a high protein treat. For myself, I love having Greek yogurt and fruit. The Greek yogurt satisfies the protein requirement, and the fruit satisfies my sweet tooth without eating food that will wreck my digestion and body composition. And when it comes to the energy balance equation, try to gain or lose no more than 1 to 2 pounds a week. Slow and steady wins the race. For perspective, there are 3,500 calories in 1 pound. So if you're at a 500 calorie deficit for a week straight, you should lose 1 pound every week. Being in more than a 1,000 calorie deficit for too long is going to hurt your metabolism and is frankly unsustainable. Nutrition is a marathon, and it's impossible to undo a lifetime of poor nutrition habits in a few weeks or months. Take your time and do it right. All right, so now that we have a decent foundation of nutrition, I want to go over some practical strategies you can implement in your life immediately. When it comes to nutrition, we can really have 3 main levers we pull. We can change how much we eat, what we eat, and when we eat. In general, you should always be doing at least one of these as your base lifestyle diet, and then you can often pull a second lever if you want, and occasionally pull all 3 if you really want to go hard on a specific diet. That said, it's important to recognize that I'm not advocating you go on a diet. I'm advocating that you have a diet. You have a set standard for your lifestyle and diet that you follow, one that is sustainable and doesn't have a fixed time period. Your base diet should be something that you can do forever on autopilot. When we talk about how much we eat, this can be limiting or targeting calories or macros. Examples of these diets could be ketosis, low fat, low calorie, high protein, or anything in between. The point is that you're adjusting how much quantity of food you're eating. Beyond that, controlling what you eat can get a little bit more personal. Everyone feels different on different foods. For example, I eat rice all the time and try to avoid bread. For whatever reason, I feel great on rice, but gain weight on bread. This all comes down to trial and error. You just have to pay attention. Other forms of this include eating paleo, vegan, pescatarian, or carnivore. The point is you're specifically cutting out certain types of food from your diet. And I'll also add, if you're completely lost on where to start, do an elimination diet. Remove everything from your diet and slowly start adding new foods one at a time to see how it reacts with your body. You'll be surprised what you may learn from doing an elimination diet over the course of a few weeks. And lastly, we can target when we eat. This is probably my least favorite option out there, if I'm being honest. I've done things like intermittent fasting, where I fast for 16 hours and eat for 8 hours, and I've even been more extreme with this too. I wouldn't recommend this for most people, but just understand it's an option. I will say, full disclosure, we've had some female clients who said it affected their period and hormones, so just be cautious. It may work for some people, but just be smart about it. All right, so let's get into some math again. When we talk about having a balanced diet, what does that really mean? A good starting place for most people is 40-40-20. That means 40% of your calories come from protein, 40% of your calories come from carbs, and 20% comes from fat. A simple rule to follow is that if you're trying to lose weight, you want to increase protein and reduce carbs. And if you're trying to gain weight, you should just eat more carbs. Now, we're gonna go over this in the next chapter in more detail, but if you don't have access to an in-body scan, a simple rule to follow is that your body weight times 15 is roughly maintenance calories depending on your metabolism. If you want to gain weight, start at body weight times 18, and if you're trying to lose weight, start at body weight times 12. It's not perfect, but will get you directionally in the right place. And now I'll show you exactly why the FDA's 2,000 calorie daily value target is total nonsense. Just using myself as an example, I'm 180 pounds, so to maintain my weight, I need to eat at least 2,700 calories a day. But I'm also very active and have above average muscle mass, so I could probably maintain my weight at north of 3,000 calories. In practice, I probably eat anywhere from 3,000 to 3,500 calories a day and maintain my weight quite regularly. If I want to gain weight, I probably would need to eat at least 4,000 calories, and if I wanted to lose weight, I'd probably only be eating 2,500 calories. In terms of other targets, we want to eat at least 3/4 of our body weight in grams of protein daily. In a perfect world, I would say 1 gram per pound of body weight and no less than half your body weight in protein. We also want to make sure we're drinking at least half of our body weight in ounces of water daily. Again, these are loose ranges. If you're more active or it's very hot outside, just drink more water. And a great simple hack when you're going out to eat is if you're ever unsure if something is healthy, just try to make sure your plate is equal portions protein and carbs, meaning that if you're eating a handful of carbs, balance that off with a handful of protein. Keep in mind, all these suggestions take time to play out. Everyone's body has different nuances that you need to figure out on your own. When in doubt, give a diet at least 6 weeks before you change it. Water weight fluctuates very quickly and can be very misleading early on in a diet, so just keep that in mind. But just remember, the point of having a diet is that you feel good and it's sustainable. If you're just constantly going on diets, making yourself suffer, and then binging once you're done, you're just wasting your time. Slow and steady wins the race. Find what works for you and stick with it. So now we wrapped up on nutrition, I want to focus on important health markers that we should all be aware of. We're going to first start off with a discussion on some physio markers that we use to assess physical fitness, and then we're going to move into some biomarkers that can only be measured with blood work. Although it can be difficult to get access to some of these tests, I think it's information we should all be aware of. And finally, we're going to wrap this up with a conversation about supplementation, when it's necessary, and what we recommend. And just to cover my bases, I'll remind you that none of this should be considered medical advice. I'm sharing information based on personal experience, our work with clients, and discussions with other professionals in the field. So with that, let's get started. Most people tend to overestimate their body fat. Unless you have access to a machine like an InBody or DEXA scan, it's very difficult to make assumptions about body composition. Now, I'm not saying these machines are perfect, but they at least give us a basis to make an apples to apples comparison. Often when we work with clients, their focus is on the scale, but that assumes 150 pounds on one body looks the same as 150 pounds on another person. This is why measurements like BMI are complete nonsense. The practice of using BMI became standardized in the 70s and 80s as a proxy for body fat percentage and an indicator for obesity. But the reality is that your body weight doesn't matter. What does matter is how much muscle and body fat you carry. Now, when it comes to body composition, you have to remember it's only you against you. Comparing your genetics to someone else's is a recipe for disappointment. Your genetic ceiling and floor are likely different than your friends and coworkers, so stop comparing yourself to them. Maturity in fitness is realizing that you have to play with the hand you're dealt. You have to learn to work with your genetics instead of trying to fight it. All that said, humans have better long-term health outcomes when we have more muscle and less body fat. This is not fat phobic to say. In general, men are healthiest when they're 10 to 20% body fat, and women are healthiest when they're 18 to 28% body fat. Are there some outliers? Of course. It's possible to be low body fat and unhealthy the same way it's possible to be high body fat and healthy. Now, I want to be clear. When I say healthy, all I'm really saying is not currently sick. Because while you may not currently be sick at a high body fat percentage, the habits that got you there will likely eventually make you sick in the future. All this is to say that body positivity is not an excuse to not take care of yourself. Especially as caretakers, heads of household, and leaders of our family and community, you cannot afford to be sick. So beware of people who say, it's okay, just treat yourself. No, you have a responsibility to take care of yourself because other people depend on you. So with that backdrop, I want to take a moment to talk through the InBody scan and what I specifically look for in my own data. I think as a society, we tend to over-glorify having low body fat percentage, but the truth is that most people should be focused on building muscle. What's the point of cutting weight if you have nothing underneath to show for it? This cutting mentality is backwards. When people say they want to tone up or be cut, what they're really saying is that they want to build more muscle, which is the complete opposite of losing body fat. Unless you're a complete beginner, you usually have to pick one or the other. Either we go into a calorie deficit to lose body fat and try to preserve muscle mass, or we go into a calorie surplus to gain muscle and try to minimize fat gain. Like everything in life, your nutrition and training needs to have seasons. If you're always cutting, you're never going to look the way you want to. So going back to my InBody, you can see my BMI is 27, so I'm technically overweight, but my body fat percentage is near 10%. Everyone's body has a different threshold, but for me, 10% is pretty low. I've been sub 8% before, and I did not feel good. This is because your body needs fat for hormonal production. When your body fat dips too low, your mood changes, libido drops, and women even stop having their period. So instead, I try to focus on the ratio between my skeletal muscle mass and my body fat mass in pounds. In this case, I have 91.5 pounds of muscle and 18.5 pounds of fat, so I have almost 5 times more muscle in my body than fat. The only way to increase this ratio is to either gain muscle or lose fat. I find this to be a better proxy for progress because it takes out the body fat percentage out of the conversation. Beyond that, the last metric I'll point to you is basal metabolic rate, which you may remember from the module in calories and macros. My BMR is 1929, which is how many calories I would burn if I didn't do anything all day and just stayed in bed. This number is based on your skeletal muscle mass because the more muscle you have, the faster your metabolism. In general, we like to retest these numbers every 4 to 6 weeks. Any more frequent than that starts to become noise, and too many things fluctuate on a day-to-day basis. All we're looking to do is to trend in the right direction. The goal for most people should be to gain muscle and lose fat slowly over time. So while body composition can be a helpful proxy for health, blood work is by far more important. When you're young, it's pretty much mandatory to get yearly physicals, but as you get older, many people tend to neglect going to their primary doctor for blood work. And because the healthcare system revolves around sick care, doctors aren't usually trying to figure out if you feel your best, they just want to make sure you're not sick. I would even argue that blood work once per year is not enough. I think at least twice a year is fine, but even as many as 4 times per year might be helpful if you want to stay on top of your health and get ahead of any incoming problems. For full disclosure, our business has a working relationship with Inside Tracker, an independent company that takes comprehensive blood work and provides you with actionable insights on any deficiencies and abnormalities. The blood work panel contains up to 48 biomarkers and offers DNA testing to alert you of any genetic issues you may be susceptible to. The service is great for people looking to improve their quality of life, athletic performance, and just simply looking to age better. When combined with the insight of a coach or healthcare provider, this information can be incredibly valuable to figure out your blind spots and specifically target problems that are unique to you. If you're interested in trying this service, you can get 25% off using our code PhysicalCulturePro25. While this list isn't comprehensive, I want to go through some important biomarkers that most people aren't aware of. Stable glucose levels are crucial for sustained energy and focus. HbA1c in particular particular provides a long-term view of blood sugar control, helping prevent energy dips and protect against diabetes-related complications that can derail your quality of life. While many people focus on cholesterol, research shows that ApoB is a better indicator of risk for cardiovascular disease. Managing cholesterol levels is essential to safeguarding your heart health, so you have the stamina to navigate life's challenges. If you work in an office or live in a city, you likely have some vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D is vital for bone health, immune function, and mood regulation. This is why we always encourage our clients to go outside and see the sun, but you can also supplement if necessary. Testosterone, meanwhile, and just getting a hormone panel in general is probably one of the best things you can do for yourself. Testosterone directly impacts muscle mass, energy levels, and mood. Recent research has also shown that testosterone levels in men have been decreasing by at least 1% a year for the past several decades due to environmental reasons. Cortisol, which we've spoken about before, is also known as the stress hormone. Balanced cortisol levels are key for managing stress effectively. For high performers, managing cortisol can mean better stress resilience, improved focus, and prevention of burnout. In addition, elevated cortisol levels will put your body in survival mode and make it more difficult to achieve body composition goals. And finally, C-reactive protein is a marker of inflammation in the body. Low levels are important for long-term health and maintaining peak performance, as chronic inflammation can lead to fatigue, decreased cognitive function, and higher risk of chronic disease. Keep in mind that there is much more beyond this, but these are some biomarkers that everyone watching should get checked at least twice per year. And just to be clear, you can also ask your primary doctor for this blood work if you don't want to purchase an Inside Tracker test. Just understand your doctor will likely ask you why you want this information, as if they're gatekeeping your blood work. In addition, all they care about is that your data is within the normal range. The problem with that thinking, however, is that normal for you might not be normal for me. Normal is based on a statistical average, and I would argue that it's lazy to judge individuals based on averages. This is why it's important to have a historical track record of your personal blood work. I'll also add that if your blood work is a bit off, let's just say your HbA1c is elevated, which means you may be pre-diabetic, and you shouldn't immediately opt for pharmaceutical intervention. My own personal philosophy is that medication is the last line of defense. We only do it if exercise, nutrition, and lifestyle habits simply aren't working. Many doctors are too quick to write prescription drugs, and many patients are too quick, or maybe I should say too lazy, such that they quickly accept medication rather than doing the hard work of changing their lifestyle. Now, I will reiterate, I am talking to those of you who do not have genetic predispositions or underlying conditions. Oftentimes, people submit to the fate of their family history. It's very easy to conflate having a family history of chronic disease as being a genetic disorder versus being a behavioral disorder. Unhealthy families create unhealthy children, and the cycle continues until someone breaks it. Recognize that you have the power to break cycles of sickness with better decisions. And self-diagnosing yourself without blood work is a prime example of confirmation bias. Just to bring this full circle with our mindset, it's really easy to say, oh, my mother had diabetes, so I will too. Well, if you believe that, then it will become your reality. Just know you always have a choice. All right, so let's say you get your blood work done and notice some of your numbers are off. So what now? Well, for one thing, you can definitely take some supplements. That said, your training and lifestyle habits will have an infinitely bigger impact on your health than taking a bottle of vitamin D pills. Supplements are just that, supplemental to the work you're already doing. Way too often, people view supplements as a magic pill, as if the reason someone is jacked or lean is because they're taking a special supplement. I hate to break it to you, but there is no magic pill, only hard work. Training and lifestyle can get you 95% of the way to your goals, and supplements may only add 5% to your progress. If you find yourself spending more money on supplements than real food, a gym membership, or coaching, then you're probably doing it wrong. If you work out hard, sleep well, and recover sufficiently, you likely won't need much supplementation outside of genetic deficiencies. I would also warn you to be cautious of any gym, coach, or supplement store shilling you useless products. A lot of gyms and coaches use supplements as a cash grab from clients. There are way too many snake oil salesmen in health and fitness who use coercive tactics to convince you to buy their high commission supplement stack so you can see results in 6 weeks instead of 12. This is pandering at its finest and appeals to clients who are desperate to see results because they've tried everything. But you haven't tried everything. You've just been doing the wrong things and probably aren't consistent. You don't need supplements to see progress. You need proper guidance and discipline. With all that said, when it comes to supplements, there are some basics that if you're doing everything else right, could potentially help make your life a bit easier. The most obvious is a whey protein powder or ready to drink for pre-workout, post-workout, or as a meal replacement. Whey protein is dairy-based, fast digesting, and an easy way to get extra protein in your diet if you don't have time to cook. The second supplement I would recommend for everyone is creatine monohydrate. 5 grams a day is all you need. You could load it for the first week by taking a double dose, but even that's not necessary, and you don't have to cycle off of it. Creatine increases energy in your muscle cells and allows you to push it a little bit harder in the gym. Men and women could safely take this, and no, it's not going to cause you to put on water weight. I've cut and bulked with creatine and felt great. And finally, a multivitamin could be helpful for micronutrient diversity. If you're missing some vitamins and minerals from your diet, this could be a good supplement, but just keep in mind, a lot of excess vitamins will just be flushed down the toilet. I do want to mention that if you are going to use supplements, make sure you only purchase from companies that are third-party tested. The regulations around supplements are so cloudy that there are unfortunately a lot of bad actors in the industry. For our clients, we like to use Fullscript, which partners with third-party tested supplement companies and is used by many medical professionals. For full disclosure, we have a professional relationship with Fullscript and can offer you 10% off any product you need. We'll leave a link in the description. And just to wrap this up, if you're unsure if you should take a supplement, get your blood work done. Taking supplements just because you feel like you're missing something is not a good reason. Never underestimate the power of the placebo effect. Okay, so for our last pillar, I want to finally talk about training in the gym. The reason I save training for last is because frankly, if you just focus on the previous 4 pillars, you'd probably make a lot of great progress. That said, I truly believe a strong body is the foundation for a strong mind. And there are so many mental benefits to working out that you really should try to make time for it. In this section, we're going to cover some exercise basics, discuss practical workout structure and split, and then wrap up with a conversation on the importance of intensity and pushing it hard. So with that, let's finish strong. I can't stress the importance of exercise, especially in modern times. Since movement and physical conditioning aren't necessary to survive anymore, most people view exercise as a luxury, but that couldn't be further from the truth. If you don't use it, I guarantee you will lose it much faster than you think. As we age, we should all be able to perform all 6 functional movements through a full range of motion and without pain. This is known as training for longevity, and these movements include push, pull, hinge, squat, lunge, and carry. If there's one simple bit of advice I could give you, it's that you should touch each of these 6 movement patterns at least once per week. Any workout program that neglects any of these patterns is incomplete. An example of a push exercise could be a push-up, bench press, or overhead press. Pulls include pull-ups, dumbbell rows, or upright rows. A hinge could be a good morning, deadlift, or kettlebell swing. A squat could be a back squat, front squat, or goblet squat. A lunge could be a box step up, dumbbell lunge, or lateral lunge. And a carry could be a single arm farmer carry, a double kettlebell front rack carry, or a waiter's carry. The point is that every exercise you could think of can be categorized into one or multiple movement patterns. For example, if we really wanted to get complex, a clean and jerk is a hinge on the deadlift, into a pull with a triple extension shrug, into a squat with a front squat, with a brief carry in the front rack position while we set up for the jerk, and then finally into a press with the overhead split jerk, which recovering from is technically a lunge. Now all that said, a clean and jerk is one of the most advanced movements you could do in the gym, but I share this with you to give you perspective. There are levels to movement. Unless you had a very strong athletic background as a child or have consistently trained your entire life, most people lose the skill of movement by the time they hit their 30s. If this is you, then you need to have the right foundation. This means starting off focused on stability, meaning relearning how to breathe during exercise, while also focusing on mobility, flexibility, and motor control. Once you have the basics down, then you can move into strength. Strength should be the foundation of your training. Way too often I see people hit their 30s and want to take on an immense physical challenge like running a marathon after a decade plus of inactivity. They toil over how to get a faster time and deal with injuries, thinking that they just need to run more, when in fact their time would probably increase if they were just physically stronger. My point here is that strength solves a lot of problems. Want to run faster? Get stronger. Want to run longer? Get stronger. In pain, it's probably because you need to get stronger somewhere. The way we get stronger in the gym is through progressive overload. This means either doing more reps, lifting more weight, or slowing down our reps, or anything else that's going to make a simple lift more difficult over time. Using tempo reps is a great way to not only build stability in your muscle, but also teach your body how to control loads properly so we can eventually move faster. When it comes to building strength, we want to move down and across the strength continuum that I have up on the screen. At the top, we have absolute strength. This is moving the heaviest weight possible without worrying about speed at all. If you've ever watched a proper 1 rep max back squat, you might notice that the weight is moving very slowly and the rep looks like a grind. Moving down the curve, we decrease the weight slightly, but move slightly faster. This is considered strength speed as we do in Olympic weightlifting, like the clean and jerk I mentioned before. From there, we move into speed strength, which could be as simple as a box jump. This is a much quicker movement with significantly less load. And then finally, we have absolute speed, which is typically unloaded and as fast as possible. Notice it's a progression. You would never take someone on day 1 and make them sprint max effort. That's a recipe for injury. And in fact, to build up sprint speed, you likely need to get stronger. If you play sports, you want to be further out on the curve so that you can learn to express power properly. That said, keep in mind that it's easy to maintain strength as you age, but we quickly lose our ability to move fast and produce power, which is why many people don't jump or sprint after the age of 30. Like I said before, if you don't use it, you lose it. But what about cardio? For general health and well-being, it's important that you get your heart rate up at least a few times per week. It can be walking your dog around the neighborhood, going for a jog, or doing intervals in the gym. The focus here is that you should get your heart rate up and break a sweat. With that said, I want to break cardio into two categories. On one hand, we have typical, slow, steady state cardio that most people think of. This is known as aerobic exercise and uses oxygen as your main source of energy. Building aerobic capacity is great if you have a need to do sustained work for a long period of time. This, of course, is necessary for marathon runners or any other activities that require constant effort. On the opposite side, we have explosive, short bursts of high-intensity cardio. This is known as anaerobic exercise, which uses glucose or sugar stored in your body for energy. Specifically, when the demand for energy exceeds your oxygen supply, your body breaks glucose down into ATP and lactic acid. And just to bring this back to the last chapter, taking creatine can increase your body's stores of ATP so you can continue to push it hard during a workout. Anaerobic exercise is great for people who need to tap into explosive short-term energy. Maybe you do a combat sport like jiu-jitsu or boxing, or play a sport that requires constant sprinting and resting like basketball. The takeaway here is that while you should do some form of cardio for general heart health, just understand that there are multiple approaches to take. My advice would be to train for your lifestyle. If you like to play sports, it probably makes sense to do more anaerobic training. But if you do a lot of long hikes or manual labor, then building a very strong aerobic base may make sense. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, only what works for you. So now that we have some background on exercise, I want to go over different types of workout structures and provide you with real workout examples that we would use with our clients. Before we get into workout splits though, I want to go through some basic guidelines that will keep you on the right track. When it comes to rep ranges, you should always work with weights that are anywhere from 0 to 5 reps away from failure. You shouldn't always train to failure, but you also shouldn't have 10 reps in reserve for each set. Find a weight where the set is challenging, but you can do it again. If you're trying to build strength, try to stick in the 3 to 10 rep range. And if you care more about building muscle, then stick in the 8 to 15 rep range. When it comes to the number of sets per workout, a simple rule of thumb is anywhere from 5 to 15 sets per muscle group. Now keep in mind that some exercises utilize multiple muscle groups, but the point here is to get enough volume such that your body needs to grow, but not so much that you're debilitated for a week straight. Again, this comes down to trial and error. If you're new to the gym, 5 sets might be enough, and if you're more advanced, any more than 15 sets are probably a waste of energy. In regard to how many days a week you should train, that really depends on how much you can handle. I would say twice a week is the minimum to see noticeable results, while anything above 5 times a week means you're probably not training hard enough. In the next few slides, I'm going to go through 4 workout templates that you can use for yourself. All you need to do is add in exercises that correspond with the stated movement pattern. Once you settle on exercise selection, then you can play around with the sets and reps. With that, let's go through them. The first example I want to go over is a 2-day-a-week split. If you don't have much time to work out, the best way to maximize your time in the gym is by doing 2 full body workouts with 2 to 3 days rest in between. Supersets and giant sets are a great way to increase efficiency in the gym. A superset is just 2 exercises back to back, while a giant set is 3 or more exercises back to back to back. On day 1, we're starting with a squat and vertical press into a hinge and horizontal press, followed by a horizontal pull and ab movement, and then finishing up with a giant set of accessory work. Notice that the A1 squat, B1 hinge, and C1 horizontal pull have priority here. These will likely be your heaviest movements and take the most energy out of you. In this example, A1, A2 could be a back squat into a dumbbell shoulder press, while B1, B2 could be a Romanian deadlift into a dumbbell bench press, and C1, C2 could be a barbell row into leg raises. Those pairings make sense, but we would never pair a back squat with a deadlift. That's just too demanding to do back to back. You have to pick your spots and know what the priority is. And then finally, section D is accessory work for the smaller muscles to work on stability and vanity. So D1, D2, D3 could be a box jump into a single arm farmer's carry and tricep pushdowns. On day 2, however, we want to introduce single leg hinge to work on unilateral strength. Often, many people only do bilateral movements and have underlying imbalances that never get addressed until they get injured. This is why dumbbells can be especially helpful. When you bench 200 pounds on a barbell, often one shoulder is overcompensating in the lift, but if you press 2 70-pound dumbbells, you would quickly notice that one side is stronger than the other. Notice as well that pulls and pushes can both be horizontal or vertical. For example, a vertical pull is a pull-up, but a horizontal pull is a row. Don't neglect training across different planes of your body. For our 3-day-per-week option, we're going to assume a Monday, Wednesday, Friday split. Whenever possible, you want to make sure you're strategically taking advantage of your rest days and giving your body time to recover. In this example, we're moving slightly away from the supersets and giant sets and focusing more on each individual exercise. This will allow you to increase your weight and intensity on the more compound exercises. For our 3-day split, everything revolves around parts A, B, and C. That's where the meat and potatoes of the training are. Parts D, E, and F are for accessory work. Specifically, day 1 is going to start off with a squat. This will likely be the most difficult lift of the day, which is why it's first, whereas day 2 will start off with a hinge. In general, squatting and hinging are 2 of the more demanding movement patterns because they recruit more muscle fibers. Just think, would you rather do a squat or a bench press? Bench pressing is obviously much easier than squatting simply because it's less taxing. taxing. And then just thinking about adding in some cardio, on day 1 we have some steady state cardio in part E. This is simple aerobic work that should get the heart rate up, but should be done at a conversational pace. The point here is to get blood flow, not to kill you. Meanwhile, at the end of our week on day 3, we have our shortest workout day that finishes up with a 20-minute circuit in part D. This will likely be much more intense than day 1 cardio piece, but you should have 2 days to fully recover. Remember, good programming is all about load management, not burning you out. For our 4-day per week option, we want to structure the workouts as 2 on, 1 off. This will give us enough time to recover and be fresh. In addition, we want to specifically separate the squat day from the hinge day because those compound movements are the most taxing. The nice thing about training 4 days a week is that it gives you the ability to focus on one main movement pattern each day. In the example on the screen, our day 1 is push focused, day 2 is squat focused, day 3 is pull focused, and day 4 is hinge focused. The accessory work is the second priority and is there to add more volume and focus on more nuanced exercises. With more training days available, we can also begin to incorporate more specific body part training like arms, calves, and abs. These muscles are so small that you can train them more frequently without burning out. For most people, I would say 3 or 4 days a week, probably the sweet spot where you can hit it hard while still giving yourself enough time to recover. Once you get to 5-day per week training, you really need to start prioritizing correctly so that you're not overemphasizing one movement pattern over the others. While you have much more freedom with exercise selection, that can also be a problem and lead to overtraining. In the example provided, we do a 2 on, 1 off, 3 on, 1 off routine. This can be very intense for a lot of people, and unless you're eating enough food, sleeping enough, and managing stress, I wouldn't suggest this for you. It's easy to fall into the trap that more is better, but most of your gains are actually going to come from recovery, so keep that in mind. With this 5-day setup, we're going to do a press and arms day with some interval cardio, followed by a hinge and lunge day with steady state cardio. Then after a rest day, we start the 3-day segment with a pull and arms day again, followed by a squat and lunge day, finish with steady state cardio, and finish with pull, push, and core day. Again, the challenge here is to manage volume. Notice we're essentially hitting each movement pattern twice in the week with varying levels of intensity. We're pressing and pulling twice a week and hinging, squatting, and lunging twice a week. We're also choosing to limit interval training to once per week because any more would be very difficult to recover from. That said, this is just one way to do it. When it comes to 5-day a week training, you can really split it in a lot of ways, but hopefully this is a helpful example to build off of. Okay, so to wrap up this conversation on training, I want to spend a bit of time discussing training intensity because I genuinely think this is where most people get tripped up. At the end of the day, you need to train hard to grow. There are a million workout plans on the internet for free, and if you look around and ask every jacked person you know how they work out, I guarantee you're going to get a completely different answer from everyone. However, the one common thread is that they all push themselves hard. That said, hard work is a double-edged sword. In our experience working with clients, people either fall on either side of the intensity spectrum. In general, beginners usually underestimate what intensity means. They're so afraid of getting close to failure that they shortchange themselves and train at 50 to 70% of their max effort. Yes, you may be burning some calories and it's better than nothing, but you're also leaving gains on the table. On the opposite spectrum, clients who have been training for much longer generally think that more is better. The reality is that if you train every day, you're not giving your body time to grow, and I would also bet that you're not fueling yourself properly as well. While it's great to push it hard in the gym to feel like you worked hard, you also need to give yourself rest to grow, or you may risk injury eventually. The reality here is that intensity is something that needs to be managed. Listen to your body. On the days you feel good, get after it, and on the days that you're feeling beat up, maybe take it easier. But the point is that it should always be challenging. Going to the gym and taking care of yourself through a workout never gets easier, you just get stronger. So just to recap this discussion on training, I want to go over a few principles that'll help you think through everything we just discussed. In general, if you're training for strength, we want to focus on lower reps and heavy weight. And when I say heavy, I mean heavy, as in 80 to 90% plus of your 1 rep max. And if you don't know what your 1 rep max is, a safe option is to find your 3 rep or 5 rep max for a specific lift. Using percentages, you can always back into what your hypothetical max is, but that's a more advanced conversation for another day. If you're looking to build muscle, the priority here is volume, as in you need to do a lot of reps and sets. Now, these reps and sets can be light, medium, or heavy, but the point is to cause muscle damage. You can also start incorporating more advanced techniques, including negative reps, pause reps, and rest pause sets. There's no shortage of ways to trick your body into growing more, but a good rule of thumb is that the time under tension is way more important for hypertrophy than the number of reps you do. When it comes to optimizing fat loss, steady state cardio is the simplest option. Steady state means low intensity, so low that you should be able to have an active conversation with someone without getting out of breath. A simple rule is that if you can't hold a conversation, you're probably going too hard. Meanwhile, if we want to prioritize performance, this is where short duration, high intensity cardio comes in. And you don't need much. 3 to 5 rounds of high intensity work twice a week will go a long way. Of course, if you're doing something more specific, like a combat sport, then you'll probably need more. And finally, intensity is the secret ingredient. Maturing in the gym is having the ability to find your Goldilocks zone. Listen to your body and pay attention to how you feel in the gym after a hard day or after an easy day. Every time you walk into the gym, you should learn something about your body. The key to everlasting gains is finding the intensity that fits your goals and lifestyle. All right, so now that you're armed with the 5 pillars, I want to use this final chapter to give you some practical ways on how to implement everything you just learned. If you made it this far, I appreciate you sticking with me, but this information is only as good as your ability to implement it. I want to first talk to you about how we like to think about goal setting when it comes to your health and performance, provide you with an actual personal blueprint that you can start using in your life today, and then give you some long-term strategies that we find effective for staying consistent when life inevitably gets in the way. So let's finish this up. When it comes to goal setting, one of the best frameworks we like to use is the triangle of awareness. You may have seen this before applied to different conversations, but the spirit remains the same when thinking about health and performance. The triangle of awareness comes down to trade-offs, a conversation that we spoke quite a bit about during the mindset chapter. You have to understand and be okay with the fact that we can't optimize for everything all at once. When it comes to fitness, people's goals usually fall into one of 3 main buckets: aesthetics, health, or performance. What I want you to do is get crystal clear about which of these 3 is the main priority for you based on the current season of your life. Now, I want you to connect this to a meaningful why. If your priority is to look better, why? You don't need to tell me or anyone else, but I need you to have an honest conversation with yourself. And in fact, it should get emotional. When our why ties us emotionally, we're more likely to do something about it. Keep asking yourself why until you start getting uncomfortable. Then I want you to think about what would happen if you didn't achieve your goal. Are you okay with that? Is that acceptable to you? Is not achieving that goal in alignment with the standard you set for yourself? Think about the most difficult thing you've ever accomplished in your life. Is this fitness goal more difficult than that? I'm gonna guess probably not. So if you've done difficult things before, why can't you do this? Once you chew on that, I want you to finally think about your dream scenario. How much better will your life be when you finally achieve this goal? Think about all the positive domino effects that will come from doing this. Do people treat you differently? Do you view yourself differently? What opportunities may open up for you? What can you do now with your newfound strength? And I'm not talking about physical, I'm talking about mental strength. Achieving very difficult goals has a lifelong effect on our confidence and self-identity. Take some time, maybe grab a pen and paper, and just think about these questions. Now, I want you to get a bit more tactical. What's a realistic timeline for you to hit this goal? Hold yourself to a date, put it on your calendar, and keep in mind, it'll likely take longer than 6 weeks to undo a lifetime of unconscious habits. Think about how long it took you to get where you currently are, and it'll likely take you the same amount of time to reverse course. Driving your life is like being the captain of a massive freight ship with tons of cargo. You can't just turn on a dime. You likely got to where you currently are by thousands of micro decisions that slowly compounded until you reached a threshold where you finally decided, no, not anymore. So think to yourself, how much work will this take? What trade-offs will you need to make to achieve this goal? And are you okay with those trade-offs? I want to give you some perspective. As of recording, we've been in business for almost 5 years now, and we've worked with at least 500 clients over that time. My team as individuals have been coaching much longer than that, and I'm sure they will attest to this as well. At the end of the day, we can give our clients all the resources on a silver platter: a sit-down consultation, body scan, movement screen, workout plan with an app and exact reps and sets to follow, nutrition plans with macros done for you, a beautiful gym with floor coaches and equipment, you name it. But nothing will overcome your own personal willpower. The only difference between my clients who crush their goals and those who don't is themselves. If you truly want to make a change in your life, it has to come from you. In the description of this video, I'm going to include a link to a PDF you can download. This is a personal blueprint that I want you to print out, fill out, and put somewhere you'll see every day like your refrigerator. Included in the personal blueprint is a section for you to write down your exact goals with a timeline and why. This is to bring some clarity to yourself and hold you accountable. Below that, there are different sections corresponding to the 5 pillars we discussed in this masterclass. Under each section are simple habits that you may or may not already do. I want you to go through each habit one by one and either fill it in, check it off, or leave it empty. If you already do the habit consistently, I want you to fill it in completely. Great job. That habit's already part of your life operating system and won't change. But don't cheat here. If you do something sometimes, but not all the time, that doesn't count. We're only filling in habits that are hardwired into us. If you don't do the habit already, I want you to leave it blank. Once you go through all the habits, I want you to look over the sheet again and check off 3 habits that you want to commit yourself to over the next 30 days. My advice would be to pick something that seems easy and reasonable. Every 30 days, I want you to reevaluate the sheet. If you were consistent and you're now on autopilot, then I want you to fill in that box completely and add a new habit with a check mark to replace it. If you were inconsistent, then try again or maybe try a different habit. The point here is to slowly accumulate more habits over time. All we're trying to do is make thousands of micro decisions in the right direction that eventually compound to our goal outcome. Slow and steady wins the race. We don't need to go from 0 to 100 to achieve our goals. Compound good habits, and over time, good things will happen. So I want to finish up this masterclass by going over some long-term strategies that I personally use with myself and that we also use with our clients to keep them on track through the ups and downs of life. My first bit of advice is to track as much as you can, especially in the beginning. Track every workout, track what you eat, track how much you sleep, whatever you can think think of. It may seem tedious at first, but you only change things when you give energy to it. If you're not measuring how you're doing, it's impossible to know when you're off track. This of course doesn't need to be done forever, but building the habit of tracking will also help you keep consistent and also give you evidence of how far you've come. I love looking back at workouts I did 10 or even 15 years ago. It's only you against you. Another piece that I find helpful is to tell people about what you're doing and what your goals are. A quick example for myself is that I recently began boxing last year. Since I started, I haven't missed one session. I always box twice a week, no matter what's going on in my life. I tell my friends and family about it, and people always ask me how it's going. It's gotten to the point where I genuinely would feel disappointed in myself if I didn't go, because it feels like people close to me are following my journey. With that said, it's also very important to surround yourself with other people who not only have similar goals as you, but also who inspire you. If you're not around people who inspire you, find new people. And if the people around you aren't supportive of your goals, then move yourself to a new space. Excitement, ambition, and passion are all infectious. You are a product of the people around you, so watch closely. On that note, finding a training partner can be a huge unlock for people, not only for the accountability piece, but also to push you. A little friendly competition never hurt anyone, and it forces you to push outside your comfort zone. While I've gotten to the point in my life where I train very hard by myself, I would be lying if I said I didn't like training with others. Not only does it push me, but training is way more fun with a friend. And finally, I would be remiss if I didn't selfishly plug my business. But if you get stuck and don't know what to do, hire a coach. There's a reason why professional athletes have coaches, because it works. Hiring a coach is the quickest way to fast track yourself through the process of trial and error. No one is too good for a coach. I've been playing sports since I was a toddler, and I have been lifting weights for more than 15 years, and even I have a fitness coach, a boxing coach, and even a business coach. So with that, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this masterclass. While I'm obviously trying to run a business, I do genuinely hope that this information was helpful and that you learned something. And if you know someone who can benefit from this information, please send it to them as well. If you have any questions about what we do at Physical Culture, you're more than welcome to contact me over email at brian@physicalculture.co. You can also call or text our business line at 917-946-3000, or even reach out over social media. We're quite active on Instagram at Physical Culture BK, so be sure to follow, share, and engage with our content as well. Again, I'm Brian, the founder and owner of Physical Culture, the home of high performers, signing off. Get after it.